Forgive me, for I have sinned. It is time for me to make some confessions. It is time for me to make things right. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could do it on my own. I thought I could live this way without consequence. But today, I need to make some changes. I'm ready to walk the right path.
Well, howdy everyone, and welcome back to a spectacularly fun video that I have planned for us all today. As I mentioned in the cold open, we're going to be talking about confessions as collectors that need to be made if we're ever going to move forward in our collecting lives. It's a willingness to be honest with yourself and with the collecting community on things that you may not have been honest with yourself about before, until today. But before we get into that, why don't you look to make sure that you are subscribed to this channel? And if not, be honest with yourself and ask why. And go ahead and rectify that right now. Give me a presumptive like on this video to help me with that algorithm and turn on your notifications while you're down there so that you know when these new videos do actually drop. Okay, here we go. The confessions of a collector. If we're to be honest with ourselves, we all should be asking and making these 4 simple confessions that could truly change the way that you and I collect forever. And the first one is probably the most obvious, but here it is if you haven't guessed it yet. Confession: I have an addiction, and this is more than a hobby. A couple years ago, I actually did a video on this channel called Hobby or Habit, and we took a look at the difference in being an adult collector versus collecting like a child. And the general theme is that adult collectors collected with a plan and purpose, while children collect based on what feels good or what is shiny and new at the time. Impulse buying, if you will. So the internal monologue you have to have with yourself is, why am I continuing to purchase new pieces to add to my collection? It seems every day I log on to some form of social media with someone looking to sell a figure that literally just came out. So why are they doing that? Why are you doing that? It's certainly not to make a profit. That's just not a thing anymore in this economy. Do they not plan or budget for it accordingly? Did they get it on pre-order thinking that it was going to be cool, and then by the time it released, they just didn't care for it much anymore and there was no emotional attachment? Did they get it because someone on YouTube suggested, man, you need this, and they were convinced and influenced instead of educated? Maybe it's a combination of all of them. I don't know. Regardless, if this is happening to you, you have moved on from this being a hobby and it has moved into being a habit. I myself had to answer these questions just this week when, once again, I got into another queue for an Iron Man that I didn't really need, simply because it was exclusive. I'll keep this, of course, because I've justified my actions, and that's a topic for another time, but perhaps you yourself have thrown down a deposit for a figure that you don't even really want, but it's become more than just a hobby, but rather a habit of getting in line for these exclusives. In short, a hobby needs to be something that is an escape, if you will, and something that brings you joy, not an unending commitment. Here's a hard question for you, but I've even had to ask it to myself. Could you stop buying new figures at any time? Or is there something that keeps drawing you back to that infamous pre-order screen? When an invisible force has more weight and pull on you than common sense, it may be time to make some confessions. And sadly, when that invisible force is taking over your collecting hobby and morphed it into a habit, you inevitably will fall prey to one of the great sins of collecting, which segues into our next confession. And that next confession that we need to talk about is this: overpaying for these figures. That's right, I said it. Now, if you were honest in the last confession and confessed to having even the slightest of addiction, you most likely have overpaid for a figure to get your fix. And here it is, confession: I have. But why are you overpaying? For me, I got hooked on the adrenaline rush of getting a new release before anybody else. And I truly hate myself for that for every day I wake up. as I've said before, that I would rationalize the purchase by justifying to myself that I'm not paying sales tax, I'm not paying shipping, I'm just paying expedited shipping and the convenience fee of immediate gratification. So it should all even out for itself, but truth be told, it never did. Now, this confession is twofold because yes, we need to take a look at why we overpay for things when we don't actually need to, but we also need to call out predatory tendencies from companies and resellers that are preying on addicted collectors that continue to use their service. Do you want to know why some of these sites are charging such ungodly prices and continue to bend you over? Because we keep enabling them by overpaying for them. And their businesses, I get it, so why wouldn't they continue to raise the prices and profit if people keep paying? Now, I'm not trying to be the fun police here and tell you not to get excited and splurge for the occasional dopamine hit of instant gratification. I get it, I've done it. That's as much a part of collecting as anything, some could argue, but what I am cautioning, and what perhaps you need to confess, is the continual overpayment and normalizing of these predatory practices. Is there anyone here today that would be willing to say, hey, I've done that, but is going to stop today? Anyone? Hey, I see that hand. Now, you may be sitting here right now about to unsubscribe, leave me a dirty comment, and jump on a live stream and tell me to F off because, what do I know? I'll collect how I want to collect. I'm a brand ambassador. I'm getting a discount for sharing. You are no moral authority over me. You're this collecting community. Believe me, I've heard all that. And that leads perfectly to my next confession that we all need to make and admit, and that is this. Collectors nowadays and in this community are more fragile than the actual figures that they purchase. Think about that. If someone is critical of the way that our display is, or what we collect, or the types of figures that we like, or the ones that we think are bad, or the ones that we think are good, we get more bent out of shape than Spider-Man's rubber costume. Who cares if the suit fabric will heal if you put it back in a static pose? The real question is, will you heal? I've had people block me on Facebook, unfollow me on Instagram, unsubscribe from this channel, all because I said something that they didn't like and they were offended. Hell, here is my confession. I wanted to quit YouTube this week because some people left some snarky comments on a video that hit me harder than I thought it would. But you know what the truth is? Running from that does not make me or society any better. We need to be okay with having differing opinions and be strong enough and willing to debate those respectfully when challenged. If I think the Acolyte sucks and you think it's great, then let's talk about it. If I think that you should pose your figures instead of putting in a museum pose, let's talk about that. An echo chamber where everyone in your circle thinks and talks just like you is not good for anyone, and in turn robs you of the opportunity to learn new things and form new opinions. We should not worry about being comfortable, but rather being stronger as you move forward in this journey. Yes, it's mean when people say things that are offensive, especially when you use your hard-earned money on something and they truly are assholes for that. But let them be the assholes and let yourself rise above that, because you will not just help yourself in collecting and in social media, that'll just flat out help you in life. Well, if you've stuck with me this far, we finally made it to our final confession. But if you haven't hit me with a like already and feel like I've earned it thus far, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up. So, our final confession is inherently caused because of our unwillingness to be honest and confess to the first three that I mentioned, and that is this. Confession: I am not having fun. When you're addicted to buying more figures and overpaying to get those, and then constantly feeling like you're behind on the real world commitments while also being hyper defensive and hypersensitive if someone doesn't agree with your opinion or says something mean, and then yeah, of course, why would any of this be fun? In order to have fun, you have to be buying figures that you want for a purpose, that has emotional attachment to you, and paying fair and reasonable costs for them, and unashamedly being proud of your collection. If you or I and anyone can come to terms with that and be honest about all these points I've mentioned, then yeah, we need to confess that we are set up for a long and healthy and fun collecting journey. And I hope you're willing to make any adjustments that you need and join me on this ride, because there's a lot of cool stuff coming soon. And I promise you, You won't want to miss it. Well, there you have it. 4 simple confessions that every collector should be making to plan to be part of this hobby for the long haul. So, what do you think? Am I off base? Am I talking out of my ass? Now, it's time for you to let me know down in the comments below if you haven't already. Are there other confessions that maybe I missed that we do need to take into consideration to be a happy collector? The floor is now yours. But before we check out of here, I did want to let you know and give you a little sneak peek of our next video that's going to be coming to the channel. And I think it certainly could be a lot of fun. We're going to be doing a behind the scenes look on a day in a life of a content creator, or YouTuber, or whatever you want to call this, and whether or not it's worth all the hassle, and take a look at whether that is something that you may want to do yourself, because I promise you, although it's a lot harder than it looks, it's certainly a lot easier than it looks. Make sense? Well, I can't wait to show you. Until then, truly happy collecting, and I'll be seeing you in the next video from the other side of the camera.